This is one of the coolest hidden features on the Syntakt. It has a built-in ARP. Listen to this. I love this. So highly recommend playing around with this. One of the coolest features on the Syntakt. Today, we're gonna do a walkthrough of the latest jam we did called Analog. We get a lot of requests from people that they would like to see more of the creative process for when we make music. And the actual process is fairly slow and fairly intimate, let's say. Sometimes I make songs in bed. Anders, the other half of Sine Wave, there's two of us. He sometimes sits at his home and he makes some sketches on FL Studio Mobile, and then we bring all of these ideas into the studio. So the purpose of this tutorial is going to be to mainly focus on sound design. So I'm not just going to play you the sounds in isolation. I'm also going to walk you through some of the ideas that went into the sound design, and that should give you some tips and tricks. If you like this type of content, please hit like, hit subscribe, and I thank you in advance. The final jam that we published a couple of weeks back is also mixed in Ableton Live. So we multi-tracked that live performance and then we applied some additional mixing in Ableton. If you're interested in that process, we can maybe do a video of that as well. Leave a comment if you're interested in that. But in this jam, I'm playing it straight from the Syntakt. So this is using the stereo outs via USB, and then it sounds like this. So it sounds slightly different, but very similar. The headline feature in this song is, of course, I call this a lead, because it's being used as a lead in many different parts of the song. Here is more of a almost supported bass. So anyway, let's start from that sound actually. So what makes this unique is it's a Psy raw, it's square waves, and then it's overdriven to the absolute max, and it has very high resonance, 90. So it sort of creates the foundation of this sound, but then it's also being routed into the analog effect blocks. And the effect block itself has drive all the way up to 11, and then it has a high pass filter. So that's why it's not, you don't hear a lot of bass. That's because of the high pass filter. Because otherwise the mix would be, I mean, you can fix these things in Ableton anyway, but I'm trying to always get the mix to be as close to the final results already when mixing on the Syntakt itself. So that's why it looks like this. And yeah, if I remove the drive, it sounds very different. Then the sound sounds like this instead. So it's very different sound. So the analog drive makes all the difference, I would say. Here's with drive dialed up to half, or technically it's not half, it's 0.88. And so the more I drive this up, the more awesome this sound sounds, in my opinion. And you could try different shapes as well. It doesn't have to be square. Actually, all of these sound very good. Because it's so overdriven, probably all of these different sounds are square waves in the end anyway. So you can do a lot of cool things with, I mean, this is the whole track really, is this sound. So yeah, that's the main thing. And then you have the bass. It's just a preset I picked and tweaked. It's also the analog track. It's Psy raw, some sort of sine-ish wave with some ring modulation, lots of overdrive again. A couple of things that are interesting about this sound is, first of all, there's on every 16th note, you can hear the filter is playing. So if I overdo it, and that's this triangle, not triangle, what is it called? Sawtooth LFO. So as long as you're using multiples of 2, so 32 on speed and 64 on BPM, that turns into 16th notes. So I can slow this down. Now it's 1/8 instead of 1/16. So that's the purpose of this, is to just create a little bit more what's the word I'm looking for? Like some more tempo. So this is a very common technique in doing music like this. The song is actually not very fast. It's like 124 BPM. But by doing tricks like this, it feels faster. So if I remove this, it just doesn't feel as intense as when I have this. Yeah, so it just makes a difference. The other LFO, it's just doing some modulation on the volume. So the purpose of this is just to create a bit of a pump effect on every fourth. So again, it's using multiples of 4. And this creates some pump effect. And that just also helps carry the rhythm forward. So if I remove this, the mix is just a little bit more muddy because there's more bass, obviously, but also the rhythm is less distinct than when I have this pump effect. So those are the tricks on the bass. I've already played the kick, so the kick in isolation is just a kick. I mean, if there's one thing that the Syntakt can do blindfolded is to dial in a very, very nice kick. So there's nothing special about this. It's just a matter of selecting which transient you want. If you watch the Digitone 2 drum tutorial that we published a couple of weeks ago, it shows you how you can achieve these similar drum machine behaviors on the Digitone 2. On the Syntakt, it's obviously very, very easy to dial in drums because it is a drum computer first and foremost. So yeah, it's just super straightforward. Here's the snare to go along with the kick. And yeah, this is another one of those fairly high-passed, let's say, weak snares, which is the style of snares that I like. There is some... You can hear that it's a bit of a parameter locking going on. So for example, I'm panning this number 3 more to the right. And this is just to create some width in the drum. So I don't want everything to be complete dead center. I want to have some width. I think that's important. So that's that. The third track is just some farts, synth farts. There's no science to this. I think I basically just picked a bunch of different presets. So this is called Softy, Nail Dry, something, which tells me that I didn't design these sounds. I just picked from the pool of presets on the Syntakt. What I am doing, though, on every step is I am, as you can tell, using a lot of parameter locks. So in this case, I'm adding a lot of reverb. What else? I have some, obviously yeah. I'm doing some high pass on this thing. So even though I'm picking presets, I'm always adapting everything to fit in the mix. And I mean, to my liking, because again, I don't know how I ended up with this. I basically just feel my way around. I have the bass playing and I have the drums playing. And that's the fundament of the song. These things just need to work together. So, and I think this works. This is the hi-hat. Sine norm, so another preset. But again, I'm changing it most likely. I mean, actually, let's load the. This is sine norm. This is actually the preset that comes with the Syntakt. So obviously, what I've done is I dial this down, and I probably made some other things to end up with something that is closer to what I had in mind for this song. And then the fourth, let's call it drum track, is number 4, which is another collection of sound farts. It's a riser. It's, let me show you. Another group of just, hold on, that's the wrong track. This one. So this is, instead of a cymbal on every 8 beats, this is, sorry, I keep pressing twice here because now I'm used to the Digitone having multiple pages on this. And I realize that the muscle memory is shifting a little bit now that I'm switching between Syntakt and Digitone all the time. But yeah, so these are just different, again, nice sounds. The purpose of these sounds is just to add some texture in the background. So they're just randomly added. not randomly. I mean, I'm adding them where I want them, but I can't really explain how they ended up exactly like this. This was just a matter of taste. Aside from that kind of cymbal replacement, let's say, which comes every 8 notes, 8 beats, bars. Terminology. All right, let's move on to something more interesting. This is I call this the arp. It's not really an arp on this part of the song. It's more of a repetitive melody. But what's really cool about this is, first of all, it's a side dual VCO. So it just has, whatever configuration it has. Like all the other sounds, this has just been dialed in to taste. Has a bandpass filter. But what's interesting about this thing is if I make this dry, I remove the delay and reverb, you can hear that it still moves in the stereo field. So if you listen carefully, it starts on the left side and then it ends somewhere in the middle. And that's because I have this LFO, second LFO, that is altering the panning. If I slow this down, you can hear it much more clear. So it starts on this side, and then it makes its way to this sudden jump back to the right side, or the center. It moves its way into the center eventually. So this just creates a bit more of an interesting movement. If I remove this completely, it would sound like it's more in the center. Actually, it's not quite in the center because this one is, but now it's in the center. And the other LFO is detuning. So without detuning, it's even more sterile. So again, that's just a couple of tricks you can apply to create some interesting, more presence, let's say, in the sound. And the stereo field is very important for this type of music. So if you have everything in the center, it just doesn't sound as interesting. But also if you just deadpan different things to different locations, it's also not so interesting. So there needs to be some movement in how sounds move in the stereo field, at least in my opinion. The other repetitive tone is this one, which is the idea with this is to almost make it sound like a piano. But when I play it in solo, it really doesn't sound like a piano. This is side tone. It's just an FM thing. It again has some interesting modulation. So if I remove the modulation, this here I'm modulating the mod parameter. So this would be this mod parameter. And then the other LFO is just doing the similar thing on the ratio. So this creates a different type of transient. So if I were to remove this completely, it's obviously a very different sound. So again, I can't really explain how I ended up here, but the idea was to create something that sounded like a piano when you play it in the mix of everything else. And it's maybe easier to hear it in the break, actually. Because these notes are brighter, so you can sort of feel the vibe. Oh, by the way, here in this pattern, the arp is actually turning into a real arp. So let me show you this. This is really, really cool. So here I'm using the side chip machine. And if you listen to the actual sequence, it's a very simple sequence. You can see here that it's I'm actually using parameter locks on one of these parameters. So I'll show you this. So if I play this now, it is what it is. It's a nice little. You should listen to it in combination with everything else to hear sort of the vibe. But now, if I modulate this decay parameter, it turns into an arp, a proper arp, 16th note arp. So this is one of the coolest things, hidden features on the Syntakt. It has a built-in arp, and you can obviously play around with a lot of different wave shapes. And so these numbers here correspond to the deviation from the root note. So I'm playing a note, in the sequence as I showed. But then I am also playing note numbers. This is semitone, so this would be the fifth. This is perfect, or whatever, not perfect fifth, but fifth. And then this is an octave up, and this is a fifth again. So I can change this. For example, like this. And that's what I was showing here is I actually parameter locking some of these, because otherwise, depending on what note you're playing, you may end up outside of the scale you have intended. So you can play around with this. I highly recommend to give this a spin. It's a really, really fun feature to add variations of a song. So I think this is one of the headline features of this song, in my opinion, aside from the analog drive. This is a really, really cool sound. I'm sure there's some panning on this as well, and I have no idea what this thing is doing. It's doing something to create some instability of the sound. So yeah, that's a listen to this. Yeah, I love this. So highly, highly recommend playing around with this. One of the coolest features on the Syntakt. It was released in the firmware 1.3. So if you haven't upgraded, upgrade. Let's carry on. This, let me show you the pads. So this is a size warp. Again, you need to hear this in combination with everything else to appreciate how it's supposed to sound. But there's nothing to this. I mean, it's just a normal size warm. My favorite machine on the Syntakt. Yeah, nothing special about it. I also have this background size warm. The idea with this one is just to create some mysterious vibe in the background. It sounds a bit strange without hearing everything else, but the idea for it is just to sit in the background. Let me do, I think there's only 3 more tracks. So this one is another size warp. What's interesting about this is that it again has this LFO that modulates the filter cutoff. So that's what creates this repetitive. I believe it's doing it on every 16th, except for some of the notes, which is parameter locked to slow it down. So it's every 16th, except for this one and I think this one. Yeah. So now it's on every 8th note instead. It's yeah, it's just a technique I'm using to create some more interesting movement to sounds. Here's the other, number 6 is just another. No, actually, that's not the one. This one. Track number 8 is another size warm. It just creates the harmonies for the pads. So 3 and 8 are pads. And then the last track is a side chord, which is it's just this complementary notes. This is another sound design trick. Again, is I have this LFO to run once, and it modulates the synth balance. So what it actually is doing is it starts from an earlier state in this balance. So this has a unison setting. If I remove the modulation completely on this, it starts at this unison state, which is a very different sound altogether. But if I pull this down and I start from the starting point, it also sounds different. So the trick with this sound is to have it being modulated like this. And then the other one is just some detuning. That also it contributes to making it sound a bit more analog. So yeah, I think it sounds a bit analog, I would say. So that's pretty much it. The other tracks are unchanged here, so. And this would be the crescendo of the song, or the drop, or whatever you want to call it, with everything going on at the same time. Yep, that's pretty much it. I hope that was useful. I hope this gives you some inspiration in terms of what you can do with different sounds to make the sounds more interesting. A lot of it is a process that just happens organically when I'm sequencing, so I don't necessarily have a plan. It's more discovering what works together and trying to match different sounds and end up with some interesting movement in the stereo field, as well as creating some unique transients of the sounds. If there's one thing I want you to remember from this video is to play around with SideChip. It's a super interesting machine. You can do ARPs and it sounds great. It has unique shapes of the oscillators. Yeah, it's just a very, very cool synth sound. And I would say the more I've been using the Digitone, as I'm coming back to the Syntakt, I think the uniqueness of the Syntakt is in the analog section. It just sounds incredibly rich and saturated and gritty. And it's just a type of texture that I can't quite reach on the Digitone 2. So they certainly complete each other from that standpoint. But yeah, if you find content like this to be very useful, if you would like for us to walk you through more of our songs in this fashion, we can certainly do it, but leave a comment to let us know that that's what you're interested in. If there are some other type of content you would be more interested in, tell us about what that is, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you.